Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. So glad that you're here as we are moving into, at least in the Western Hemisphere, the winter time of the year. And it's such a good time, I think, to really start to come inside, start to really reconnect with yourself if you've been kind of too much out in the world, especially obviously if you have some hormonal imbalances going on or other things happening. Which brings me to today's guest. Her name is Reenee Khanna, and she's the founder of Love Your Moon Cycle, a clinical herbalist and purveyor of ancient wisdom and medicine. Over the last 5 years, Reenee has been helping women around the world battle PMS and painful periods using ancient medicinal wisdom and Ayurveda. Not only have these women been able to find relief from painful periods, but they have also transformed their lives to feel energized and vibrant throughout their cycle. Welcome, Reenee.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm so glad that you're here to talk about this because, as we were talking about before we got on today, I've dabbled a bit in Ayurveda, and I think it's such a amazing thing to sort of look at these ancient approaches or ancient medicinal, ways of being that knew all this information way before what we're discovering now, right? A lot of what we're discovering now, it's like, oh yeah, they already knew that. Yeah, exactly. And so to be able to tap into that and all of that wisdom, and I love, and actually I'd love for you to share with the audience today about how you learned about Ayurveda to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I was saying, Ayurveda is it's in my blood. So it's ancient Indian medicine. For us, it's something that just seems to be passed down through generations. So 20 years ago, in my early 20s, I used to live in Mumbai, India. I went there for a 3-year stint and lived with my grandmother while I was there. And so she was the one who she started using these remedies on me because I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. So going to India was like a shock on my system.
Oh yeah, I bet.
And I wasn't feeling well a lot. So she'd always be concocting something for me and like pulling out her herbs and making something, and it always worked. And so I got so fascinated, and I thought, she's full of so much wisdom. And I started to just sit down with her and learn from her, like everything she knew. And I took it really for granted. Like I just thought these are just family recipes or things that are passed down. And it wasn't until recently that I really got into Ayurveda when I had my own health issues, and I started to think about my grandmother, and I started to think about the things that she used to tell me, and I started to turn to that when obviously the medical system didn't have answers for me. I found my answers in ancient medicine. And then I realized the value of the stuff that she was sharing with me, and that, it is really valuable. Like you said, it's valuable stuff that it's just so much wisdom, so much knowledge, and science is just starting to catch up and discover it and create frameworks around it. And I got to this place where I was like, well, I don't need the frameworks. I think that we can just move forward and start using it.
Yeah. You're like, I know it works. So we don't, and I understand that there's a lot of people that, whatever brought up in the Western medicine ideals of we need this structure, we need this framework in order to believe something. And that's fine. Though I think what you just said about your own experience of not really finding answers within that system, you get to a point where you're like, well, this is not working. And so let me try something else, whether it has, this sort of defined thing or not. And I think about Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, even if, it's completely different framework, obviously, but even if it doesn't have these sort of technical studies and things behind them, which we are more and more, but even if you don't have those, we're talking about millions of people, right? Over thousands of years that this information came from, right? So the amount of actual, if you look at that from a study perspective, that's been studied on a whole lot more people than our allopathic medicine has.
Really, it's evidence-based, right?
Yeah.
People evidence of it working, and that's what we're basically going on here. And most of the people that I work with, either it's something that they've kind of, they're very comfortable with because it's in their family and it's traditional and they believe in it, or they've gotten to a place where they were so desperate because there were no scientific answers for them that you have no choice but to have faith. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll dive more into Ayurveda connecting to your hormones here in a few minutes, but I want to talk to you first about the inner moon cycles. Like, I think this is fascinating when I was reading about it on your website. So can you share exactly what that's all about?
Yeah, absolutely. This was like ancient wisdom. From what I understood, it was like, Western medicine or Western ancient medicine that
Hmm.
talked about this, but it blew my mind when I learned it. And what it basically says is that when you can compare a woman's menstrual cycle to the moon. It's often called a moon cycle, and
Hmm.
often say it's 28 days long or whatever, and sync up with the moon. And it's not necessarily about syncing with the moon, but it's more about understanding that you're mimicking the moon. So you're every month as you go through your cycle, whether you're menstruating or not, whether you're younger and you haven't started or you've already hit menopause, you're still cyclical, and
Hmm.
you're still going through this cycle. And the cycle basically is this. So when you're on your period, you're a new moon. So new moon is dark, it's hidden, it doesn't want to be seen. For anyone that manifests with the moon, this is the time of setting intention. It's
Hmm.
a time of solitude, of turning inwards. And most women feel that way, right? When you have your
Hmm.
period, you don't want to bother with the world.
Yep.
You just want
You're
to
like
develop
under the
yourself.
covers.
Exactly. That's wisdom. That's hibernation.
Yeah.
So it's not just the moon phases, it's the seasons of the earth as well. You're
Hmm.
in your winter, you're in hibernation. And then as you come off your period, you go into a waxing moon,
Hmm.
or in seasons it would be spring.
Hmm.
And it's like a seed coming out of the dark, right? Coming out of the dark soil. So you've received the seed when you're in connection with divine. I say that when you're on your period, it's like full inward alignment. You're in
Hmm.
your chakras. We'll talk about the chakras in a second.
Yeah.
And you come out and you're in spring. You're in that waxing moon. You're starting to put structure and form around the ideas that you have. Your
Mm.
masculine energy dominates at this time. So this is where you want to take action. You want to start to connect with other people. You want to do all of those masculine things. This is why women feel so good in the first half of their cycle, because we
Hmm.
live in masculine patriarch,
Hmm.
and those masculine energies are really highly valued and respected. And so we're meeting the expectations society has of us, because
Good
we
point.
have stamina, we have energy, we can be out there, we're taking action and doing, and it's measurable, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then you come into full moon or ovulation, which
Hmm.
is summer. This is your inner summer, your inner full moon. You're shiny, you're bright, you're completely outwardly aligned. That's the
Hmm.
way I see it. You're ovulating. So, from a biological perspective, you want to mate. This is why you're outwardly aligned, and you want to be out there and you feel
Yeah.
energized and energetic.
Putting all those juices out, right?
You are, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. When I tell women how to use this stuff for their business, I'm like, this is when you want to do a sales call.
Yeah.
This is when do those presentations, because
Yeah.
you're glowing and people are feeling magnetized towards you. You're in your
Hmm.
summer. So if you think about the earth in the summertime, she's giving. There's tons of fruit on the tree. There's lots for you. Like, there's so much out there that she's just giving to you, right?
Hmm.
That's kind of what's happening during ovulation. And this is where women get really tripped up, because you're like superwoman during this time and you have all of this energy and you can multitask. And so you want to be out there and you want to be doing things. And you're like, I kind of say it's like a circle. So if you think of a circle and you think of a line right on top of the circle, and that point where the circle touches the line is ovulation. And
Mm.
you set your bar right up there, and you
Hmm.
want to be there all the
Oh,
time.
you
And
so want to.
yeah, and then you fall off a cliff because you're coming down the circle and you go into what we call PMS, right?
Right.
And now you have all this energy and you've scheduled all these things for yourself because that's where you think you're at, and then you don't have the energy to do it because you're in autumn, you're in your waning moon,
Hmm.
and this is a time of release, right? So if you
Hmm.
manifest with the moon, I'm just going to go back for a second, and you're in the full moon, you know that full moon illuminates and it
Hmm.
shows you what needs to be released. And then during the waning moon,
Mm.
release phase, which is exactly what PMS is. If you've ever released emotions during PMS, you know what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
It's autumn, the leaves are falling from the trees, Mother Nature's getting ready for winter, for hibernation. This is when our feminine energies kick in.
Hmm.
Feminine energies, they're receptive, they're intuitive, they're emotional, they're reflective, they're introspective, right? This is when we
Hmm.
want solitude. We want to turn inwards. We want to start to, our inner world comes alive and we want to process that, which is why we
Hmm.
don't need too much outer interaction when we're in that phase of our cycle. And then you go back into your new moon and your period, and that you're fully inwardly aligned and you want full solitude.
Mm-hmm.
I heard this, so I don't know if your listeners have ever heard of a red tent, or you've
Mm-hmm.
ever heard of the tent
Mm-hmm.
concept, right? So the red tent was exactly that. It's a place to go and take solitude when you have your period. It's a place to connect with divine, to be nurtured, because you're nurturing and giving when you're ovulating, but not when you're, even Mother Earth shuts down pretty much in the wintertime, right?
Right.
Like
Right. Yeah.
all the energies in the ground, in her roots, inside, inwards. So
If
that's
if we had that option, right, to go to the red tent, if we had the option of being taken care of during that time by others, yeah,
right. And this
change
is
a lot.
why, so there are countries, actually, it's interesting because in Asia, there are
Mm-hmm.
countries that mandate a day to 1 to 3 days off a month for women when they have their,
Wow. Wow.
because they still hold on to this. So the West is kind of catching up. It's been in debate, in certain countries in Europe, and North America is just really far behind on this.
Yep.
But we need to catch up. And I think it's talking about it, because when I heard it this way, because I always thought I had ups and downs,
Mm-hmm.
and my was this thing that just happened to me, actually not even happened, got in the way of my life.
Got
And
in the way. Absolutely. That's
right,
how most women kind of look at it.
medicated away. Let's just get rid of it. Let's regulate
Mm-hmm.
it. And so when I saw it this way, and I say it's like, if a plant, I'm a herbalist, right? So for me, it's all about the plants. If a plant doesn't thrive, you don't blame the plant.
Right.
You change the surroundings. You put more
Environment.
sunlight, more water, right? You
Mm-hmm.
change the environment. And women need to see themselves the same way, that you are cyclical, and everything around you has to adapt to that, because you can't change how
Right.
cyclical you are.
Right.
This is the way you're made.
You
And
can fight all you want and it's not going to get you anywhere. Yeah.
no, as many, medications as you take, it's just gonna, and it literally puts you in, for some women, debilitating pain.
Yeah.
That you have to lie down and you have to rest, right? That's
Yep.
why we're feeling that pain.
It's being forced. Yeah. And, I mean, I was a younger woman that had issues, with my cycle pretty young. And so I know there's plenty of younger women out there that do, but also I find that, if you are younger and you're already having issues, or if you're not already having issues, it's better to get on top of this connection to your cycle younger, because things are going to get tougher as you age, as you get into the perimenopausal years, when things get, all whacked out.
Yeah. And here's the thing, right? Because your body is always speaking to you. And when you're having PMS, it's trying to tell you something. And if you ignore it and you let it accumulate, right? PMS is actually, when you're releasing toxicity, you're releasing toxic energy, which will eventually manifest in the physical. So like, don't pay attention to it and get out ahead of it, and anticipate it and decode it. I call it decoding PMS. Missing out on things that will eventually scream at you because we're not listening.
Yep. They will come screaming with a knife in hand. I'm just kidding. But yeah, absolutely. That's so cool. I've known obviously about the cycle and sort of the things that happen, but I love all of that imagery brought together, the seasons, the moon, our own personal cycle. So that's really powerful. So thank you for sharing that. So tell us a little bit more about how you can use Ayurveda in order to balance out your hormones.
Yeah. So what happened is, once I saw this information and I started to process it, I had a background in Ayurveda, and I was like, oh my God, this actually maps right onto the 5 elements in Ayurveda, and it maps right onto the chakras. And we know how to balance the elemental energies. We know how to balance chakras. So when you talked about getting out ahead of it, this is about saying, well, I know which energies are activated throughout my cycle. I know it'll show me where I'm off balance. And if I balance those energies, in Ayurveda, we use principles of opposites to balance. If I apply those principles and I nurture myself accordingly throughout my cycle, I can get out ahead of it and I can stop, PMS and painful periods. And that's where the whole like mind-blowing thing came in. Because I was like, so basically we talked about the seasons, right? So if we look at Ayurveda, we have 5 elements. We have earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And these 5 elements combine to make 3 body types. So we have kapha, which is air and ether. Kapha, which is earth and water,
Mm,
Pitta, which is fire and water, and Vata, which is air and ether.
mm,
And so we balance these through opposites. So, for example, if you have excess kapha in the body, of excess earth and water energies in the body, these are heavy, denser energies. You're going to balance it with something that's lighter or that's warmer, which is fire, air, and ether. Right. So now, if we go through, so what I notice is that the seasons also have elemental energies coming alive. So winter. So sorry, let's start in spring. Spring is like earth and water. It's like
mm-hmm.
so you're looking at late winter, early spring. We're in kapha season, earth and
Okay.
water.
Okay.
As things start to warm up, we go into pitta, which is water and fire. Obviously, summer is pitta season and
Mm-hmm.
hot. And then autumn is vata season. It's
Mm-hmm.
air and ether. You have that cool, crisp air, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
all that going on. And then, sorry, it's like, I would say, depending on where you live. So it's very dependent on the climate where you live when the seasons change over, but that's the gist of it. So as you
Right.
go into late fall, early winter, you're in vata season. So now, if you look at your cycle, that it just maps right on there, right? So as you're coming off your period and you're going into ovulation, that's kapha time.
Mm-hmm.
Kapha energies, if you think about it, they're very strong. They're all about stamina. You have the ability to take action,
Mm-hmm.
all of those things. And then you go into pitta season, which is ovulation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fiery. There we go. That summer coming in again. And then vata, which is air and ether, which is PMS time, which is, again, this is why we often feel tired. We have anxiety. We feel depleted.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all vata symptoms, excess vata.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how that mapped on. And then I kind of went into chakra energies, because you're actually activating each chakra as you go through your cycle. So because the chakras also relate to the 5 elemental energies. I don't know.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're on your period, you're in your crown chakra. So crown is our connection to divine. This is why we're taking solitude. This is why we're inwardly aligned. This is where we're receiving that seed of purpose or inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to crown and you go into your root chakra. You plant the seed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we're coming off of our period. And like I mentioned before, it's like that creation, that seed coming out through the dark soil and starting to sprout. So you're going to sacral chakra. And then from sacral, we move into the solar plexus. You're getting more heat, more will, more action, right? Solar plexus, if you think about someone that has a fire in their belly and they're driven and they're taking action, that's where we're at. Then we move into the heart chakra. So this is ovulation, full outward alignment, connected to everybody else, looking for that mate to, you know, ovulating, right? You're in your heart chakra.
Yeah.
And then we move into our throat chakra, right? So this is when we go into PMS and that truth starts to reveal itself to us and we start to feel emotional about it. Then we go into our third eye chakra as we're in PMS. This is where intuitive feelings are coming from. Dreams get activated during this time. And I talked about our inner world being active. This is why so many women want solitude during PMS, is because there's so much going on in here and around here during PMS. It's very hard. Outside energies can be very triggering. And I'm sure we've all felt it. We call it mood swings or like, you know, sudden reactions. But like there's so much going on in here and you have this outside world that has demands of you.
Right.
Of course you're gonna have a reaction. Of course you're going to snap at someone, because so many emotions and so many things are coming up through the throat and the third eye chakra during PMS. And then from there we go back into the crown during our period. So as these energies activate, you can balance them. If you notice an imbalance, you can start to balance them out. And there's so many different tools to do that.
So can you give us an example of what you would do, say maybe like during your period when you do have, you know, these outside energies coming at you?
Yeah, I'm going to say solitude, which is probably not the answer everybody wants.
Right.
Keep going on with our lives.
Right.
I think one of the biggest things that I learned through this journey and working with so many women is that when you take time for solitude and reflection, you're actually more efficient when you go back.
For sure.
Like
100%.
you know what you're doing now, right? Your mind is clear, refreshed, you've released toxic things and you're coming back fresh and new. So I would say solitude is huge. Meditation is huge because these energies are so active. You need to ground and center. Air and ether. Remember, PMS your period is air and ether,
Right.
think of a tornado. I always tell people, think of a tornado. If you're caught up in those energies, you're going to be thrown around.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening to most women. But if you're grounded and centered in the middle of it, you're actually having visibility to all of this energy, which is actually also information.
Mm-hmm.
Ability to it being in the center. So meditation, grounding, if anyone likes grounding, like going outside and just connecting to the earth and feeling that stability and grounding is huge. You know, there's also like different herbal remedies that you can do. So if you're feeling that, if, for women that have excess vata, they're going to feel crampy, they're going to feel anxiety, they're going to feel dizziness, lightheadedness, just a sense of feeling very airy and not grounded. Think of heavier grounding, nourishing foods like, you know, oatmeal or nuts, like heavier oils, anything like that. That's going to make, that's why we have cravings actually. A lot of women will crave sweet and salty. Those are very grounding tastes.
Right.
Fatty foods is what you're craving during period because you're looking for that grounding, that nourishment. So I always tell women eat differently, like make 4 different menus for like the 4 weeks of your
4
cycle.
weeks. Yeah. So do you feel like meditating on a particular chakra during that season is helpful too?
100%. If you're feeling imbalanced, if you're into crystals, you can kind of meditate with like a certain crystal that, you know, will calm the chakra already activated. Or do, you know, if you're looking for grounding during your period, then take like a heavier, like a black crystal. Like I always say the black ones are more grounding, right? The root chakra ones, and meditate with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. Because it's, you know, there's definitely times where I just can intuitively feel like I need to focus on this chakra today. And so I'm going to pay attention and see, you know, I haven't really thought about that syncing up with my cycle, but I'm gonna start paying attention to that. I love that. So with Ayurveda, and let me see if I can like wrap my head around this question exactly. But like, so I know that there's what the Vikrudi, right? And the Prakrudi, is that right? Yeah. So the imbalance you're born with, which one is that one? Is that Vikrudi or Prakrudi?
So basically what you are at conception.
Yes.
Is your ideal balance. That's
ideal balance. Okay.
You want to be at. You already imbalanced by the time you're born.
Right. That's your perfect imbalance or whatever. And then you have the imbalance of where whatever right now is happening, which doesn't always line up, right, with what you were born with.
Exactly. Right. So that's the Vikrudi that you're talking about. Right. So you're coming. So in Ayurveda, we don't use numbers to gauge your health. So it's not like there's a standard or a range. It's about what you're born with, like what your elemental makeup needs to be, like the ideal makeup in order for you to fulfill a purpose. We're all right. And you're made a way to fulfill your purpose, but then you stray from that. That's why we start to feel like we're lacking purpose. We're out of alignment when you look at ancient medicine.
Right.
We're finding that alignment. So going back to what you were meant to be, that ideal balance, and we use principles of opposites. So let's just say you're born with a lot of pitta energy, a lot of fiery energies. And now these are gone off balance. These have been your strengths your whole life, right? You're a perfectionist. You're very driven and you're motivated, and you're probably social and you have good concentration. So you start to draw on this so much that energy in your body, and you have excess heat in the body. Heat in the body always leads to issues in the cardiovascular system, or even solar plexus area. So we want to cool that down. So we're going to use opposites to cool that down and bring it back into the balance where it was at, where you were born with, when you didn't draw on it so much and try and increase it. Right?
Yeah. Well, my personal story around that was, so I was born Pitta Vata.
Yeah.
But then I was vegan for about 7 years in my 20s, and I switched to Vata Pitta. Right. And so you can really see even just dietarily how you can get thrown off. Right. And that wasn't really the best for my body. But I'm curious how how does that play into sort of as you cycle throughout the month? You know, are you kind of always shooting to be in your you know, what you were born with, or it, and this is why I know it's big and probably harder to explain in just a simple synopsis, but
What you're getting at is cycles within cycles, right? So
uh-huh.
I with each of my clients, I say you have to identify your cycle type, because
Yeah,
every
gotcha.
woman, when I talked about what we're experiencing in the seasons, we're all going to experience it uniquely based on our individual body type.
Okay, gotcha.
And so, you know, somebody like you with the excess vata or
Mm-hmm.
excess pitta in the body, you're going to feel more around ovulation and PMS. Like,
Mm,
right? So that's where
mm-hmm.
you you already have excess heat in the body,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And now you're ovulating, and that your hot chakras are activated, the fire energies are hot, so you're going to feel it even more.
Gotcha. Okay.
And
Okay.
if it's summertime
Yeah.
outside, it's going
Which
to be even
I've
more
which is
aggravated.
why summer's not my favorite season, right? Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I like it better now in life, but still, I'm like, I don't like it too hot. And
no,
because of
and
that
you won't.
pitta, yeah, yeah, and that's why I love autumn, you know, or fall, and even winter too, you know. So yeah,
Right down.
yep,
And to add to that even more, we talk about women going through hot flashes and stuff like
mm-hmm,
that.
mm-hmm,
Now you're in, because your life has kapha, pitta, and vata as well.
right,
Childhood is kapha, right? You're building that foundation of your life. Then you get
mm,
to the prime of your life. You're in your fire. You're in your heat.
yeah,
There's another cycle going on, even bigger than that. And
right,
then as you go into vata, you know, as you get older, you want to be more. Solitude matters more to you. You don't, not so concerned
mm,
what people think about you. Outside
mm-hmm,
doesn't matter as much as your inner world, your inner thoughts, right?
yeah, yeah,
So there's that cycle going on too. So what I tell women is, like, the best basic place to start is know that the first half of your cycle, you're mainly in your kapha energies.
mm-hmm,
Eat lighter foods,
okay,
eat alive foods. Like, I get women to create rituals. So my ritual is like a cup of coffee, because it's time for a stimulant to
mm-hmm,
start, you know.
get you going,
So
mm-hmm,
so that's the main thing. So in the first half of your cycle, eat lighter foods, eat less often. Otherwise, you're going to accumulate excess kapha. That it actually
mm.
point in the
So if you
cycle.
eat too heavy, then you're gonna have too much kapha going on, essentially.
Earth, water, it's that heavier
Okay.
energy, and you're going to feel. You probably feel it during PMS as like lethargy and like
Mm-hmm.
depression. When women come with, I feel very sad before my period. I'm like, yeah, that's accumulated in the beginning,
Mm, interesting.
first half.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
eat lighter foods less often in the first half of your cycle.
Mm-hmm.
As you go into ovulation, your fire, like your body's heating up, your digestive fires are stronger. If you
Mm-hmm.
want days, cheat on your ovulation day and like have, you know, whatever it is
Whatever.
that you
Yeah.
want to not eat all the time.
Yeah.
'Cause your fires are stronger. You're gonna start burning that off. So start
Mm-hmm.
eating more, start eating. Pitta can almost eat almost anything without issues, except for spicy foods and
Mm-hmm.
pungent. So cut
Yeah.
back on eating foods which are usually spicy and pungent.
Well, and I have rosacea, which goes, I think, along with pitta just perfectly, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
of course, yeah, the spicy, the caffeine, all of that's like triggers for me. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely excess heat.
And even though
Um,
I love him.
you
Yeah.
will, right? Because,
Yeah.
like I said, it's your strength, and you're
Yep.
drawing on it, and it helps you keep going. But
Yep.
it's eventually going to lead to burnout. That's why
Yes.
it's called burnout. There's so much
Mm.
heat in your body, you burned out.
Burnout.
And
Yeah.
actually, that's another great sign for the women that have excess heat in the
Yeah.
body after ovulation. They usually just burn out. It's like they've fallen
Mm.
off.
That
Whereas
makes
somebody
sense.
who doesn't have that, it's more of a slower depletion. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like starting to feel depleted or heavy and
Mm.
lethargic.
Mm-hmm.
As you
Mm-hmm.
come into vata, as you go into the second half of your cycle,
Mm-hmm.
remember we have the cravings. We want the heavier, nourishing foods, but you want to go for the healthy stuff, right? You
Mm-hmm.
want to go for, this is where you can have fruits if you live in that kind of a climate.
Mm-hmm.
This is where you can have, like, you know, more of like the oats, the oils, the nuts. So seeds in the beginning of the cycle,
Mm-hmm.
nuts the second half.
Second half. Okay. Okay.
So anything heavier
Yeah.
is what you want to do during PMS. And during your period, this is
Yeah.
where you can fast.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask. Okay. Because it really, I mean, I've always noticed for me, the less I eat during my period, especially the first couple of days, the better it is, right? Even though sometimes you want to, it's like you're not even hungry, but you want to eat just whatever cravings and that kind of thing. But it always made the situation worse.
100%, right? And
Yeah.
even if you look at cultures around the world, they fast to build that connection with divine, right?
Right.
So
Right.
this is why, right? This is where you're trying so hard to connect with divine. You don't want those grounding
Right.
things.
Right.
You want to be in the ethers, right?
Yeah.
In the chakras.
And let your body release all of the things that it's releasing, right? And so not sort of getting in the way of that with
Exactly.
with food. So fascinating. I love like all of the different things that it can do. So tell me a little bit about how you work with women.
So I have a 90-day program,
Okay.
and in that program, we identify, like I said, we identify your cycle type.
Mm-hmm.
We look at which chakras are off balance, because that's usually the key indicator. And I love saying this to people because it really takes them by surprise. I'm like, you can have one symptom or 100. It usually traces right back to two
What?
chakras, at
Yeah.
one to
It's
two chakras.
amazing, right?
It is like,
Yeah.
that's what I was like, the system is so ancient, but it just makes so much sense, and
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, then we look at your chakras, which chakras are off balance.
Mm-hmm.
We identify your Ayurvedic body type so that we can understand your where in your cycle you're most likely getting triggered, and
Mm-hmm.
what's PMS.
Mm-hmm.
We decode the PMS because that's super important. PMS is releasing toxic energies from the body. And when we suppress that as opposed to understanding it,
Mm-hmm.
we're losing out on information that can tell us what chronic ailments might be,
Mm-hmm.
manifesting physically in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge part of what I do. And then we look at your masculine and feminine energies and how you can harness them in your lifestyle, to be more efficient, right? Because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of this feels inefficient when I'm saying, well, you got to journal every day, and you got to meditate, and you got to relax. And but it's learning that there are certain things in your specific life. So,
Mm-hmm.
I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I'm like, during that PMS phase and during your period, these are the things that you should be doing in your business.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other tasks that you can do, the doing task can come later on, and you'll be a lot better at them because you're well planned and you know exactly what you're going to need to do.
Right.
So
Right.
we do that. We look at all of that over a course of 90 days. And it's always small baby steps, because it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like a lot, but you do the small things that give you big impact.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah.
and I think, I'm glad you brought the lifestyle aspect up, because I am, constantly telling my clients, I mean, a lot of times they will want to know, which supplement do I need to take, which food, but none of that is going to work if you don't shift your lifestyle, right? And particularly the amount of stress that women are under. And like you're saying, like going against where you are in your cycle and sort of pushing at these different places in your cycle where that's not where your body wants you to be, it really is such a huge part of the issues, right? I mean, and there's no way that those problems are gonna, take care of themselves until you start shifting that.
100%, right?
Yeah.
Like, resistance is what creates pain.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
the more we resist, the
Yep.
more pain we're going to find ourselves in. So,
Absolutely. And it's tough in a society that pushes us to constantly be working like a man, or like that masculine energy, and it's like that's not what our body is made to do. Yeah.
no, you're right. We're
Yeah.
literally pushed into being in our masculine energy so much
Mm-hmm.
that our feminine energy starts to feel really foreign to us and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
frustrating.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the biggest things I've noticed, is that it's not about, women, especially with the mood swings. It's
Mm-hmm.
not about it's not about the actual feeling itself that's troubling people. It's about
Mm-hmm.
not knowing how to process it or what to do with
Mm-hmm.
it, and
Mm-hmm.
they're channeling it in all the wrong ways, because there's no one ever talks about this. We're taught in school how to think rationally and logically,
Yep.
and crunch the numbers, and create, even if you're writing an essay, there's a format, there's a framework and a structure. What about
Mm-hmm.
all that chaos that's going on in your mind? How do you process that? How do you give it space to
Yeah.
show you something, reveal
Yeah.
itself?
Absolutely. One other question I had, so for women that are, going into perimenopause or already are in perimenopause, can things still line up even though, the cycle can go all off whack? You can have a lot of anovulatory cycles. You can, have a period after 2 weeks. You can have a period after 2 months.
Yeah.
Can they still get into this, rhythm in the same kind of way?
100%, because we're never going to stop being cyclical, right? That's who we are. The length of your cycle might change,
Mm-hmm.
the way you experience it might change,
Mm-hmm.
but there's so many clues. And I think we've been so accustomed to thinking that our menstrual cycle is about bleeding. And
Mm-hmm.
that's actually just one part of it, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
are changing through the whole cycle.
Yeah.
It's a cycle. It's
Yeah.
not a few days. So I would say for women that aren't experiencing their period, it's never a reason to think that you're not cyclical. You still are. And there's
Mm-hmm.
so many clues that will help you get in touch with that rhythm of your cycle.
Again. Well, I will tell you, my mom, who's almost 75, she
Yeah.
says that there's still this time where she'll be, sort of more tired, more out of it, that kind of relates back to when she would have a period, so it's like, that goes to show, right? It's still happening on whatever level. It just looks different than when we're, have menstruation still.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love
Yeah.
that. Even
Yeah.
at that age.
I know, right? Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing all this really cool information with us today. And I love all these connections. I'm really going to sit with this information, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to start tracking the cycle a little bit differently, because I know the power of working with your cycle, and yet I still can get caught up in all of the, push forward as an entrepreneur. And it just makes me feel so much better in my body when I reconnect to, when I reconnect to the moon, when I reconnect to the, different elements of the earth. So I really appreciate you sharing this. Really awesome.
Thank you for having me. I
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so let people know where they can contact you.
Definitely. The best place to find me, you can download. I have a guide to stopping PMS mood swings. It's at www.loveyourmooncycle.com.
Mm-hmm.
They can also come join me on Instagram at loveyourmooncycle.
Nice. Perfect. All right, you guys, thank you so much for being here today, and I will see you next time. Where's my